NFL defensive end, Kevin Carter. He won the Super Bowl with the Rams. He's an all Pro Bowl, a two-time Pro Bowler, sacks leader in the NFL. Man, he had a fantastic career, and obviously it's truly an honor for him to join the show. And now he works for CBS Sports. So we're going to talk about all that. But first, I want to get to his legendary career. And first of all, how are you and your family doing so far during the tough situations?
We're doing great. Obviously, you take everything with a grain of salt. And, obviously, we're all living through, I think, life-changing, world-changing times. So I think, it's you got to keep that in perspective. But all things considered, we're blessed, we're happy, we're healthy, and we're doing well. I have a son that's a sophomore at Dartmouth. He's a tight end up there playing for Buddy Tevens. And I'm still doing my stuff with CBS Sports, and my wife is an active social worker here in the state of Florida. So we're hanging in there.
Yeah, and hopefully we get through all of this, and hopefully there's a light through the tunnel here soon.
Definitely.
Yeah, but I want to start off with your childhood and growing up. And for you, while we were growing up, when did you start realizing that you wanted to be play in sports and be an athlete? And before you chose football, did you get to play any other sports growing up?
Well, and in my house, we were always active, and it didn't matter what we did. We had to do something, whether it was playing an instrument or playing a sport or taking up an activity. Sitting around after school doing nothing, was not an option. So I was always involved in a lot of different things. Grew up playing saxophone, grew up playing predominantly soccer and baseball. Baseball was my first love. And but I knew from the time I was 5 years old what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a professional football player. I fell in love with the game, when I was 3 years old, before I could really understand what was going on the screen. The voice, Steve Sable, and just NFL films, and just hearing that love affair kind of come to fruition with, like, a kid, in the 70s and 80s, growing up with, it was a cold and bitter day, and hearing all the old NFL film voices and stuff, and it was that nostalgia grabbed me from an early age. So even though I didn't play football, I was a huge fan growing up, and like I said, I played a lot of soccer and baseball, and didn't find football until my sophomore year in high school. That's kind of when I was a bit of a late bloomer, and my freshman year in high school, I went out for my JV football and basketball team and didn't make either one of them. So I was in marching band my freshman year. I played saxophone there in Tallahassee, Florida, and then I grew 7 inches over the summer, started playing football, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So for you, did you have like a role model growing up that you looked up to in the NFL?
I had a couple of posters on my wall. I was a huge fan of Georgia football, all things Georgia. So I loved Herschel Walker. They had just won a national title in 1981. And I loved Vince Dooley and everything that Georgia football stood for. So I had a picture of Herschel Walker on my wall. And I had a picture of a guy named Mike Singletary, who was probably my favorite all-time, inside linebacker. And that's what I played in high school. So what I started off playing is, so I had a picture. I've had those two posters on my wall, and later, as I got older, I also had a picture of Lawrence Taylor on my wall as well. So those are a few guys that I really looked to pattern some of the aspects of my game after.
Yeah, so now I want to ask you about your high school career, because like you just said, you were a late bloomer, sophomore. You started playing football as sophomore. So what did you do? What was the process like for you, and the adversity steps that you had to take in order for these colleges to look at you as a player? And what was your process when you started playing football sophomore year?
My process is, I think people find loves and things that they're passionate about at different times in their life. For me, it was a passion that I always had inside of me. I always wanted to play professional football, and it was a dream of mine. But that's all it really was a dream. It was so far away. So when I had a growth spurt and I came out and played football, I didn't really have the good part is I didn't have any bad habits, and I had good coaches, and I was like I said, I hit a huge growth spurt, and sometimes people are genetically predisposed to do certain things. And I kind of took to football like a duck to water, and I didn't have any bad habits. So they said, do this, you'll get stronger, do this, you'll get faster. And, no one knows what the future holds, but obviously I was one of those people who would go on to play 14 years in the NFL. And so things, when I hit the field at that age, things just made sense to me. It's kind of uncanny. And I didn't have any bad habits. I listened and I did everything I could to be the best that I could. And I had an appreciation for football, for that limelight, that attention, that everything, because I kind of went from being an unknown, anonymous, very normal kid who was in marching band. And then, a year later, I was, being kind of put up on a pedestal as this special athlete who was going to go on to college. And the more I played in high school, the more accolades that came my way. And, by the time I graduated high school, I was, USA Today, Parade, Magazine, All-American, and all those things. But that was such a far cry from who I was as a freshman in high school. And so, that's the thing. Really, no one really knows what the future holds for you or for anybody. Our futures aren't written. And I think, obviously, people will say this over and over again. If you have a dream, what stands between you and making that dream come to reality is the work, obviously, and the circumstances of your life, and a whole lot of luck, to be honest. And, that was a dream career that I had in the NFL, 14 years. I never missed a game. And I'm very fortunate, won a Super Bowl, had a great, wonderful, blessed career. But again, it's lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, like to me, I saw a film on you and watched you back, because obviously I didn't grow up in the back in the day, but for you, I watched some film, and you were a hard hitting defensive end, and I think you're the GOAT of defensive end.
I appreciate it.
But so I gotta ask you though, take me back to your recruitment process, and obviously you're from Florida, Tallahassee, Florida, and what was it like getting an offer from Florida, and obviously the team you played with, but was there any other offers out there before deciding on Florida?
There were a lot of offers. The funny thing about the recruiting process is once you hit the status of what today would be a 4- or 5-star recruit, once you hit that status, then you pretty much get offered by the world. I took visits to Nebraska, to Notre Dame. These are coaches like Tom Osborne and Lou Holtz, and these are legendary coaches that were recruiting me at the time. And so it was, you talk about what was it like? It was a dream come true. For me, I had an older brother. Like, my older brother was 2 years older than I was, and he went on to play college and pro football. So I kind of saw the process and what it entailed through him, but I'd never imagined it would be that big or even bigger for me personally. And it totally was. Having the Bobby Bowdens come to your living room, having Lou Holtz come to your house, those are just crazy situations. And for me, it was such a surreal process, and I'm such a visual experience, memory type person anyway. And for me, as I look back, those are some of the greatest memories and visions, of my life that I still have in my brain. I'm really blessed to have gone through that, because, everyone's whining and dining you and wanting you to come to their school. So, and I got a chance to, talk about legendary programs and legendary coaches when they were at their peak of performance. Florida State, Miami were all in the top 10, in the 90s, and you couldn't go wrong going to either one of them. Nebraska was a top 5 program. Notre Dame was a top 5 program. And, they had players wall to wall. And that whole experience was a dream come true. I happened to fall in love with the University of Florida, and a man named Steve Spurrier, was the one that came calling that I listened to and really gravitated towards. Had a lot of respect for what he had done. He had just won the ACC at Duke a couple of years prior. He came to Florida, and Florida was on probation, was number 1 in the SEC, was a great man. I liked the way he lived his life. I liked the way he treated his wife. I liked the way he treated his family. and I liked what he stood for. And, like kind of, looking back, hindsight is perfect science, but being so lucky and blessed to be a part of the resurgence, or like the national brand of Florida Gators football that you see today,
Right.
National titles, that recognition all over the world, it wouldn't be there if it hadn't been for the groundwork that Steve Spurrier and a few special players and people in an organization back in the early 90s laid down. Like you wouldn't have the Urban Meyers and the Tim Tebows. There would be no legacy of Florida football if it hadn't have been for Steve Spurrier doing it back then. So I'm, looking back on it, I'm really lucky, and I'm happy, and I'm blessed and proud to be part of something that was so strong and still stands today.
Yeah. So this is a two-part question here. For you, was it tough turning down Bobby Bowden and Lou Holtz at the same time? And also, what was the experience like playing at home, staying home, being able to stay home and playing for a coach like Steve, and having your family members watching in the stands too?
It was hard to say no to those coaches, but I think I kind of go back to something that I ended up telling my son as well when he was going through the recruiting process. Something my dad told me. There are about 4 or 5 major decisions that you make in your lifetime. If you really, just step in and oversimplify and look at your life, where you're going to go to school, who you're going to marry, your decision to have children, to buy your first house, sell your business or whatever. There are things, macro decisions that in our lifetime that come along that we make, and they really have a profound impact on which way our life turns, so to speak. And that decision of where to go to school was the first of those 4 or 5 major decisions that I would make in my lifetime. And so having to turn people down is part of the process. Having to say no to good people, having to make tough decisions. For me at the time, my dad told me that's part of being a man, son. Mm-hmm. That's part of life, and it's part of who you will be. So it doesn't mean that you don't like what they were telling you. It's just it just means you like something better. And choosing your right situation, doing what's right for you has to be something that you take more serious than anything else, because everyone is unique and has their own set of circumstances, and it's your life to live. Right. And so for me, I had to be comfortable with making those decisions. Now, don't get me wrong. There was a lot of pressure being put on me. When I committed to the University of Florida, Coach Bobby Bowden called me up, and he was like, I can't believe, oh man. And I had coaches leaning on me and coaches saying, oh, you guys are never going to win. You're going to go there, and that's a mistake that you're making. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, and this and that. And, and you realize that the stakes aren't always as high. Things are never as good and never as bad as they seem. It's usually somewhere in the middle. But for me, my look back, so to speak, and my look back on, my life in that period is one that was the exact right decision for me.
Yeah. So now I want to get to your draft experience. Obviously, you got drafted in 1995, round 1, pick 6. By the St. Louis Rams, now the Los Angeles Rams, obviously. But take me back to the draft experience. What was it like spending time with your family, waiting for your name to get called? And what was your reaction when you finally got the name called in pick 6?
That was a completely surreal experience as well. Here I went from, kind of an unassuming high school kid who was living a dream of playing college football. Yeah. And then to go from that situation to, 4 years later, I'm one of the top defense players in the country. It's me, it's Warren Sapp, it's guys, his names like Derek Brooks, yeah, and Derek Alexander and all these different guys. And that's who, I'm being compared to. Those are my peers. And when you start to look at the magnitude of what it was like to be, I was actually there in New York at the draft, and since I was going to be a top pick, they kind of bring you in, and so it's totally wonderful, surreal experience. I'm so old. The funny thing is, when I post a video of getting drafted, all the young people in my life give me grief because they're like, oh man, that isn't Commissioner Goodell. I'm like, no, that's a guy named Paul Tagliabue. He was the commissioner back then. But it was a wonderful experience. It was such a blessed experience to share with my family, to have your name called, to go out on that stage, to shake the hand of the commissioner, to hold up that #1 jersey. It's something that I still have on my wall today. It's framed. I have a bunch of jerseys just in the next room that are on the wall. And that's one of them. Talk about those experiences that shape your life. Well, that's an experience that shaped my career. Going to the Rams, the St. Louis Rams. I'm the first St. Louis Ram, first pick of the St. Louis Rams, and that's a trivia question. So if you ever say, who was the first St. Louis Rams, Kevin Carter, 1995. So, and that was a dream come true because it didn't matter who I played for. I didn't care if Alaska had a team and they were in the NFL. I was going to go live in Alaska. It didn't matter if you were in the NFL, man. I couldn't. It didn't matter who. But being a part of the Rams organization back then, going to St. Louis, that was such a dream come true experience because I'm 22 years old. I was in a brand new city. I had a pocket full of money, and I had an entire city that knew who I was. I was charged with the task of helping to resurrect the franchise. And, they were going to write good articles about the team and bad articles about me if I played horribly. I mean, it was the best thing in the world. I mean, it was the best job I could ever have. I tell people, I'm really lucky in my lifetime to have had 2 careers that are dream careers for a lot of people. To play pro football and to now to do college and pro football on a major network, there are 2 things that just dream careers because they don't really seem like work. But playing back then, being in a new city, the excitement of finding your identity, figuring out who you are as a young person, earning your keep, working on your craft, looking up to guys in the league. I was looking up to guys like Robert Porcher and, Reggie White that were guys that were still playing. And those are the guys that I wanted to emulate. I wanted to get to their level. I wanted to make it to a Pro Bowl. I wanted to win a Super Bowl. I wanted to do all these things. I was so excited to write my story. And that's the anticipation and the excitement that comes with being there present at the draft. It's almost, you have this keyhole look into your future and what it can be. For me, it turned out to be a dream come true. For me, it turned out to be a 14-year NFL career. For me, it turned out to where I parlayed that into a broadcasting career. And, but the best thing about all of that is I was able to do it, and I'm still happily married, and I'm healthy, thank God. And my kid, my kid and I have a great relationship. So, if all those other things in my life weren't there and weren't okay, I think it would kind of cast a negative shadow, kind of a love-hate relationship with that status and that stardom and that celebrity that comes with playing football and the challenge. But I don't care, what the circumstances are of anyone who played this great game. Very few of them are going to say that they regret playing in the NFL. And so I'm thankful, for the experience, but that whole experience was surreal. And funny thing was, I was looking back, my son showed me a video on YouTube. It was a draft in the year. It was like 1995. And they were showing all these different things, like what was popular, kind of what was going on, this documentary, and seeing my younger self, there in New York with Steve McNair, God rest his soul. Tony Baselli was there, Keyjana Carter, Warren Sapp. I mean, Kerry Collins. We had so many of these names that were there, and seeing myself as a 21-year-old, kid that didn't know anything at the time, and just, all wide-eyed and bushy-tailed. And it was, that experience in itself, was something that I will always hold dear and sacred to my heart. It was a dream come true to actually be there and present. It is something that as the years go by and you get further away from it, it means more. Seeing all these young men with their families and seeing all these moments captured, you get to do it once. And man, just like, I tell people this story all the time. Before I played in the Super Bowl, there was a guy named Howie Long that I had a conversation with. And Howie Long said that, Kevin, I was on a great team that won Super Bowl. And I was a young player at the time. I looked around and I saw all these great players playing for the Raiders. I saw Marcus Allen. I saw just guys who were going to be Hall of Famers. And I thought, for sure, we'll be back. This team will be a dynasty. And he says, in 14 years, Kevin, I never went back. Go make a memory. And so those are words that I try to live by. Whenever there's something like that, make a memory, make your mark, make sure that your look back on your life is what you want it to be, because that's when things are said and done, all we're going to be left with is the memories, the relationships we had, and how they made us feel.
Yeah, and now you can write your story. That's amazing. And and so I got to ask you though, as a rookie, to be able to win the Super Bowl in your rookie year, and then going into the locker room, what was your reaction when you saw players like Isaac Bruce, Jerome Bettis, man? And then you play with you had a great defense. And what was the message that the coach gave you guys that year to able to win a Super Bowl in your rookie year?
Well, that wasn't my rookie year. That was my 5th year and for the Rams. So that's actually what made it so special, is that I was there. And when I first got to the Rams in '95, I mean, we were in essence a struggling team coming from LA that was losing fan support, and wasn't really doing well as an organization. In the NFC West, we were somewhat last. And so coming to St. Louis, the team had new life, right? We were in a new city. We had fans who were inspired and really eager to see us. And I was the first round pick. We were horrible. First 4 years, we got our brains beat in by the 49ers. I mean, and different teams, they owned us. I mean, the Carolina Panthers owned us. I mean, it was hard. It was sad. I went from a college program only having lost a handful of times. I only felt what it was like to lose a handful of times in 4 years at Florida, because 3 out of 4 years, I won SEC titles at Florida. So if you think about how competitive Southeastern Conference football is, and how, LSU and Alabama and these teams dominate, I won I have 3 rings in college. Okay. So we were dominant.
Wow. And
then to go from that, the one thing about when you're picked early in the draft, you usually go to a team that's not doing so well.
Yeah.
So for me going to the Rams, a great opportunity, and I was lucky and blessed and excited, but we weren't very good at the time. So, being a part of that rebuilding process, going through a couple of head coaches, a guy named Rich Brooks was the one that drafted me. He was a coach from Oregon, trying to piece it together. And, we had good players, but we were so incomplete. Picking up players along the way as my career went on, things really changed and took a massive turn in my 3rd season playing for the Rams, because a man named Dick Vermeil took the job.
Wow.
He walked in, and I was so excited, because when I was playing in college, he's a man that did color for ABC, and I loved to listen to him on the air. But when I got a chance to visit with him on the sideline before he was doing one of our games in college, I remember talking to him on the sideline. I remember how detail oriented he was with all of his boards and getting information. He's asking me about my parents and, what I'm majoring in and what I want to do with my life and who I am as a person. And I'm like, man, this is Dick Vermeil. He's a legendary coach. I'm a huge football fan. And, his Eagles beat my Cowboys back in the 1979, back in to go to the championship game. So I know who this man is. And so having him come in as a head coach, I was inspired, because I had some of that energy from college kind of back again. I had the figurehead of a great man, of a coach that I could believe in and could inspire. So he told us in his opening press conference that in 3 years, we'll be world champs. He said this. The reporters laughed. People scoffed at the idea. And he says, in 3 years, we'll be world champs. And we were. The first year he was there, I think we drafted Grant Wistrom, we drafted Orlando Pace, and we drafted Torrey Holt. Those were our 3 first-round draft picks in 3 years. leading up to Super Bowl.
Awesome.
And you talk about playing with all those great players. That's the thing. We were all discovering how great we could be collectively. At that time, I look around and yeah, we were stacked, but no one really knew it because everyone has good players. But looking around, I see Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, Azahir Hakeem. I see, Ricky Prohl. Oh, there's a guy named Kurt Warner who was our number 2 quarterback and ran the scout team the year before, who, no one outside of our organization knew about. And we said, I don't know, I'm telling my dad, our number 2 is pretty good, Dad. I don't know, we'll see if he ever gets his chance, but he's pretty good. Yeah. And in free agency, we bring in a guy named Marshall Faulk. Yeah. And he just somehow makes everything work. And he's the catalyst and the glue that just held our offense together and made it work. But our defense, number 2 in the league that year, number 1 against the run. We led the NFL in quarterback sacks. I led the league in sacks individually, personally. We had a great team. And it meant so much more winning Super Bowl, holding up that trophy, having come from 4-12, having come from 5-11, having come from, being a kind of a laughing stock as a team that no one expected to come out of that situation. That was what made it so special because, a lot of people can say, well, I joined this team and they were already good. It's like, nah, dude, like I was there in the lean years, I built this. And when I hold this trophy up, like my hands belong on this trophy. I can lay claim to this. And it's something that no thing will ever be able to take away. I've got a replica of it just in the next room.
Yeah, what a luxury though to go from Jerome Bettis to Marshall Faulk. That's a great thing to have. You guys did there, and man, obviously that Super Bowl run. So obviously you beat the Tennessee Titans, which you signed with them the next year, and which is crazy. You did the opposite. Most of the players say can't beat them, join them. You did the opposite. But so what was it like? So after that Super Bowl win and going through your free agency process, how tough was it leaving the Rams? But what was the reaction to Tennessee Titans fans and the team when you signed with them?
The reaction was good. Fans obviously, they may have a little bit of beef, just like guys in the locker room. When you're a free agent signing and you walk into a locker room, there's going to be that question. There are going to be some people who say, yeah, he's worth the money, or I know who he is. He's a tough guy. He's going to make us better. But there's also that beef that, hey, man, you just waxed our tails and beat us in the Super Bowl, and I don't like you very much. So, and you have to be willing as that free agent walking into a hostile locker room, and I had the attitude like, can't help it that we beat you guys. I'm so sorry for the hard feelings, but, let me show you why I make more money than you. Right. And let me show you why I'm here. I'm here to help. And so I think, after you get past the unpleasantries of kind of ingratiating yourself to a team, kind of endearing yourself, I knew that I had to step up my game, but I also knew that there were special men and people in that locker room that I was going into. I know that, from winning the world title and being in a special esprit de corps type atmosphere, that quality that, if you could bottle it, you could be a rich man and sell that togetherness, that chemistry, that catalyst that helps you win a championship. To even get close to that, you have to have some semblance of that togetherness. I knew that existed in that locker room that I was walking into. I knew after playing against them twice in that season, they beat us the first time at home in Nashville earlier in the season, and then we went on to beat them in the Super Bowl. But playing against them, the heart and the toughness that they showed, you knew that there was a bond there that you were walking into and disrupting. So for me, when I looked around and I saw Eddie George and Javon Curse and Brad Hopkins and Blaine Bishop and all these stud players, the Steve McNairs, the Bruce Matthews, of the world. I mean, this team was loaded top to bottom with dudes, and guys who had more than a couple of stripes on their shoulders, and they had a love for each other, that I wasn't going to come in and disrupt. I could come in and be part of, but I wasn't going to disrupt that. So that in itself was a blessing and an awesome transition, because I did just that. And, I grew to love that locker room like I loved my locker room at the Rams. And you don't always find that. You don't always find a place where you feel like you're really at home and you're really accepted by the people that you come and do battle with on a daily basis. But that was a great, probably one of the best 4-year periods of my life. It was a very rich time in my life, made a lot of money, had a lot of great memories, had a lot of great friends, and we had good teams. I mean, we actually lost to the Raiders in the championship game before they went on to lose to the Bucs in the Super Bowl. So we still had a lot of great chemistry, and I like to think that I helped to add to it, and being that we almost got back to the top of the mountain, so to speak.
Yeah, and also you played with Keith Bullock, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's my man.
Yeah, so he was another great player in the league. And for you, I want to get to the late Steve McNair. And what was it like being his teammate and watching him go about his business in the locker room? And obviously a great quarterback, and rest in soul, and he one of the best in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Steve was, people say all the time, who was the toughest player you faced? And, in different positions, obviously, if you say who's the best offensive tackle, I'm going to say a guy named Willie Anderson, played, for the Cincinnati Bengals, should be on the Hall of Fame. He probably will be, in the next couple of years. But, he's a guy that personally playing against was tough. There are guys like, Corey Dillon at running back that, if you haven't played against Corey Dillon, if you don't know who he is, man, like, ain't in the Hall of Fame, but maybe he should be. But also, there's a guy named Steve McNair, who was probably the toughest quarterback, hands down. There is no tougher quarterback that I played against or played with than Steve McNair. He had the strength and the agility of the strongest, toughest running back you could ever find. He had a cannon for an arm. He had the instincts and the fearlessness of anybody, that you want to put up against, and he was the perfect combination of so many things, but such a cool guy. Anyone who played with Steve, man, knew that he was probably like one of the top shelf quality, like, individuals as far as a friend, like, just a great, great, great dude, an awesome, amazing teammate that would give you his last. And there's no one you trusted more on Sunday than Steve. If the ball was in his hands and there was time left on the clock, I knew we had a chance to win. And I know I'm not the only person that has that kind of respect and reverence for who he was and what he put forth. Keith Bullock, man, is another dude, man. When I got there, Keith had just been drafted. He was still a young guy, but just, certain people are going to go on and play for a long time at an extremely high level. And Keith was that guy. He was already playing at a Pro Bowl level when I got there, and, went on to be a long-standing member and, be head and shoulders above most of the linebackers that he played with and against. But really, really lucky, really blessed to have some great teammates along the way. That people ask, what do you miss most about the game? Yeah. I miss game day. I miss walking into the stadium. I miss the atmosphere. I miss the excitement, the bus ride, the plane, being sequestered, walking in and the experience, the fresh cut grass and all those things. I miss all those things, but more than all of that, I miss the guys. Right. I miss the camaraderie in the locker room. I miss the Keith Bullocks. I miss the Steve McNairs. I miss, the Blaine Bishops, the Brad Hopkins. I miss the Kurt Warners of the world. Like, I miss those guys just joshing around in the locker room, grinding, working out, watching film, putting in work. Like, that's what you miss the most, is being part of something so special that takes so much energy and so much time. I mean, it really takes a chunk of your soul and takes years off of your life. Right. That you're trading in, you're trading in possible health, in the future, playing a very violent, very real game that's dangerous. But man, I loved it. So just a great experience and great for my look back, and thankful to live the life that I have.
Yeah. So before we get to your broadcasting career, so looking back at your football career, having a Super Bowl ring, 2-time Pro Bowl, all-time sacks leader, All-Pro, Rookie of the Year, St. Louis Rams MVP. and over 628 tackles and over 100 quarterback sacks. Do you believe you should be in the Hall of Fame? Because I think that you should be in the Hall of Fame.
I always try to quote Frank Thomas. You know, the big hurt when they asked him if he deserved to be in the Hall of Fame, and he says, well, 500 home runs, right? That's the benchmark. So, I deserve to be in. And I had, someone kind of said the same thing to me, and it's like, well, you got over 100 sacks, and you played 14 years, you never missed a game, you got all these things, these stats. It's not really stats that get you in necessarily, but you can't get there without it. And it's not necessarily just your reputation that gets you in, although you can't get there without it. I think those things on paper are there, but there's also a lot about perception that gets you into the Hall of Fame as well. And I think that perception, the consistency of being with one team, having a clear vision, identity of who you were the entire time you were in the league. Those who know football know that I played up here. Yeah. I was a starter in this league for 14 years and I never missed a game. And I was never hurt. Like, I have one of the longest active streaks of a non-quarterback in our draft class, so to speak. There's two people that never missed a game in their entire career in the 1995 NFL draft class. Two people. It's me and a guy named Derek Brooks.
Wow.
So
that's crazy.
I'm in good company when it comes to the accolades and whatever, and I'll put my reputation and my career and stats and numbers up against anybody. I'll take the Pepsi challenge and whatever, compare my numbers. But that's not why I played the game. Getting to the Hall of Fame isn't why I laced up the cleats and put on a helmet to begin with. I played this game because it was my dream come true, and I played this game because I loved it. I had goals personally that I wanted to make and that I wanted to achieve, and I achieved every one of them. So in my eyes, in my life, in my heart of hearts, which is why I was able, after 14 years, never missing a game, still healthy, still with prospects to play, like still got offered, multi-year deal by Bill Belichick, and I walked away from it. I could have kept playing, and I walked away on my own terms because I was completely satisfied with everything that I've done. So, a long story short, to answer the question, do I think I deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? I think that is subject to who you're asking. Personally, I think I'm as good as anybody who played, and I think circumstances, had I played consistently for one person or whatever, or on a bigger market team, there's so many different things that you can't really control. But, and my name can go on a list of guys who probably deserve to be in, but might not ever get there. But you know what? I can truly say that I'm happy and satisfied within my soul and my heart of hearts with who I am and what I've done.
Yeah, if you want to go baseball terms with your career, you basically pitched a perfect game every start.
Right.
So now transitioning from your career to the now broadcasting. So what's it like being a broadcaster at CBS Sports, now covering the game from a different aspect, and obviously passing advice to these young players that are coming up now?
Talking about football in the capacity that I do right now is also another dream come true. Didn't know that I wanted to do it. Was told that I was always a good interview, and I spoke well and could enunciate and do whatever, but those things don't necessarily make you a good broadcaster. I think the thing that really keeps me going, and that I'm really so lucky to have found and have, is I am a football junkie. Like I'm a football nerd. Like, I love the ins and outs of the game, the X's and O's. I love, investigating personnel, knowing, coaching trees and pedigrees and philosophies, and who coached under this person and what he's going to try to do with this scheme, and, how you can take this player from this scheme. And I think he has the ability, because he's versatile, it can play either a 3-4 or 4-3 or this, or play a slot or play an outside. Like, I love the technical aspect of football, and my job allows me to gorge myself on that. So, just a great a great opportunity and a great thing. And I'm really lucky and blessed to have kind of, made my way into it. The advice I would have for someone who's trying to get into any type of broadcasting, or, especially former athletes, if they're trying to do something, approaching everything like it's a job is the key to everything. I think some guys get into broadcasting and they try to live off of their name. Right. And they think just, who I am, and I played, and I have this PhD in football, and I can speak on those things. And it's not, there's a lot of research work that goes into it. And I never took that for granted. And so that's the part for me personally that I enjoy so much. Like I get up and I read sports news, and news in general, like every day. And I know I'm like a lot of people, I've turned into my father. Like, I have a newspaper in my hand at all times, all day, night. I'm reading, information. And so for me, it's like I said, I'm now living my second dream career, and doing something that I absolutely love. And I love, the prognostication. I love breaking down. I love to be able to tell the viewer what's going on with, and why a team is winning, and, from an X and O standpoint, how a team is put together, and what I think, a team or person or player will do on the next level, or however it shakes down. I had the best job in America. Now I think I have the second best job in America.
Yeah. So now on our show, we do this fun little segment on the show. It's called the rapid fire segment. You ready for this?
Let's go.
All right. So I know tonight should be fun for you guys, because today we find out the NFL schedules and for this season. And obviously, I found out this morning, I'm a big Cowboy fan, and we're playing the Buccaneers week 1 in Tampa Bay. Obviously, your former team that you play with too. And what are you most looking forward to when this the official schedule comes out? But this morning, I guess it came out with the week 1 teams. And what are you most looking forward to when they come out?
Just the matchups. I mean, obviously, we could talk about who we think is going to be present, and who we think how these teams are going to come together. But, it's fun to look and see, okay, the return of Dak Prescott, right, facing Tom Brady here in Tampa. That to me is an intriguing matchup. I can't wait to see, what the Carolina Panthers are going to look like with a kind of a rehabilitated Sam Darnold in a new system. What's that going to look like? Is Teddy Bridgewater going to sign in Denver, and will he compete for a starting job, versus Drew Lock out there? Like, all those different combinations, when you think about the combinations of what could be taking the field come week 1 in the NFL, that's what the release of the schedule brings about. A lot of times when the schedule comes out, that's when people are also placing their bets, right? For at the end of the season or whatever. So I think there's so much anticipation with the upcoming season, and I think the release of the official schedules and the matchups, is what makes it all worthwhile. Look, at the end of the year, 32 teams, there's only one team holding up a trophy.
Yeah.
Okay, but it doesn't stop the excitement and the anticipation and the love for each individual team all year round.
So where do you keep your Super Bowl ring?
I keep it locked in a safe. Keep it locked in a safe. I'll bring it out if I'm broadcasting, if I'm on assignment, or if I'm in the studio. I'll usually wear my Super Bowl ring, or I'll wear one of my SEC like bowl rings or whatever from college. But I usually have one of them on while I'm on the
air. Funniest teammate that you played with?
Oh man, thing about the NFL is you are always surrounded by the most eclectic group of individuals that you will ever find. I mean, it takes all kinds. It takes straight-laced guys. It takes, religious guys. It takes guys who are crazy. There are guys that are your best friend on the field that you don't want within 10 yards of your family. There's all types of personalities, but I think the funniest guy, one of the funniest guys that I was ever around, was a guy named Greg White. I played with him when I was in Tampa, and he changed his name to Styles. So if you look him up, his name is Styles G. White, and he was probably later in my career, when I was in years 13 and 14, I come across this young player, and I thought I'd seen it all until I met Styles G. White.
Funniest person that you work with right now at CBS Sports?
Brian Jones.
Okay.
Yeah, Brian Jones, BJ is by far keeps us all just in absolute stitches. I mean, different broadcasters, guys. He played linebacker,
Yeah.
Texas back in the days. He's been on CBS for I think 13 or 14 years now. Excellent broadcaster, but just a character. Knows football and knows his stuff like the back of his hand. But his ability to be comedic and loud and raw and unfiltered, along with that technical aspect, I think he really has it down to an art form. So to me, he's the funniest guy I work with.
Yeah. So for you, outside of the Super Bowl, what would you say your most memorable game that you played in?
The funny thing about, I think when you talk to most players is that I can remember every game I played.
Mm-hmm.
If literally, like, I may not remember the actual date, but if I look and see, okay, on December 23rd, 1998, I played against the New York Jets, and I'm like, yeah, I remember that game. It was on turf. I was playing against a tackle named James Brown, and Boomer Esiason was a quarterback, and and so you have all these things in your head. Like, I have vivid memories of nearly every time I put my hand on the turf. So it's hard to say what game really stood out. I think maybe the championship game, playing for the Tennessee. Oh no, actually, you know what? My most memorable game is the coldest game that I ever played, and that was at Foxborough in 2003. It was a 2002 season. We were up playing against the Patriots, and whoever won that game was going to go on and win everything. We were the two best teams in the league that year, and we happened to be in the same conference. So that year, yes, the 2002 Tennessee Titans team, we went on a tear, won like 11 straight that year after starting out like 1-4. And wow. we were playing the Patriots at Foxborough. It was before they put in the field turf. The ground was frozen. It was a 7:30 kickoff, and it was 3 degrees. Wow. No, it was like 8. It was 3 degrees at kickoff. Whew. At kickoff. Man. At 7:30. So it was only getting colder from there. I had frostbite on my hands. I remember, and we lost that game. Oh man, I was so mad. We lost that game, and I remember flying back after that trip and just being totally disillusioned and let down. But I remember that game probably more than a lot of them for a lot of different reasons.
Wow. Thoughts on Eddie George getting a head coaching job at Tennessee State?
I didn't even know that Eddie coached. So, but no, yeah. No, I'm absolutely happy for him. Really, really happy for him. Great man, amazing teammate, amazing presence in the football world, in the world at large. I mean, if you know anything about Eddie George, I mean, he's such a person that I admire because of his ability to not be afraid of anything, his ability to transform himself. I mean, if you've seen him in Chicago on Broadway, like, he is, the man made himself, transform himself into a Broadway actor. Just really a lot of respect. Really good luck to him. I know his presence and his heart are in the right place. I know that those kids in that organization will have a presence that is able to make people and things move. Yeah. There are people who are sort of lighter fluid or jumper cables, or they're the catalyst, or they're the kind of the wind that makes things go. And Eddie's one of those people. Like, one of the biggest reasons why I practice yoga today is because of Eddie George. Eddie George was the one who introduced me to my first yoga instructor in my 9th year of football, playing for the Tennessee Titans. And she was just a really dear friend. So I'm one of the people. I'm not going to be one of these haters that says, oh, Eddie George, he's coaching and this and that. I'm like, man, more power to you. They are getting someone who is an uncommon talent, who has an uncommon soul, and he's a great person. And I like also what it means to some historically Black colleges. Yeah. I love that you see Deion Sanders, at Jackson State. I love that you see these prominent dominant NFL superstars, mega superstars, with all of this reach, all this platform, and this far-reaching, influence, that they are going to HBCUs.
Yeah.
Bring some of that money, those 4 and 5 star recruits and that spotlight, bring it to some historically Black colleges, bring some of that money, some of that awareness, because, there was a time when if you were a Black athlete in America, that's where you went, that's where you had to go play football. There are people like Jerry Rice and Walter Payton that's where they came from. They came from the historically Black colleges. And so, yeah, I think it's wonderful on so many levels that he is now the head coach at TSU.
So I want to ask you about your son. What's the scouting report on your son as a tight end? And is he planning on joining the draft next year?
Well, we'll see. I mean, he's still got 3 years of eligibility, including this season, because the Ivy League schedule was canceled this past year because of COVID, and so he gets that year back. My son is a 6'6.5", 6'7", 255-pound tight end.
Wow!
And he's a former basketball player. Played on a shoe contract team. So I guess you play in high school basketball, AAU. You can't really get recognized and can't really get seen and recruited unless you're playing on a shoe contract team. So he was on an Adidas national team, and so he played 16 and 17U and went all over the country. Went to the Bigfoot tournament and Fab 48 out in Vegas, and we're going all over the country playing. And then a funny thing happened after his junior season in basketball. He said, the day after the season ended, he was a little burned out, and all of his friends had played football forever. Wow. And some of his best friends and the coaches had been begging him to come out. I coached football at his school, Berkeley Prep, here in Tampa, Florida, where I live, and he never played. I didn't really care if he played. It wasn't a huge deal. My son had an unweighted 4.0 at one of the best schools, in Florida, best private schools in Florida. He was smart. He was brilliant. He's taken all these AP courses. So what do I care what he does with the spare time? You want to play basketball, dude, and so he always did that. And so he came out for football the day after his junior season ended and says, I want to play football, Dad. I just want to, give it a try. I think I'd be remiss if I came through high school and I didn't, try the football thing. And he came out there and, took to it like a duck to water, and wow, absolutely loved it, loved his experience, got recruited, got 30 offers, had a bunch of big schools, took visits to like Boston College, was being recruited. He was going to take a visit to UCLA. He was being recruited by Michigan State, had offers from FAU, got offered by like 6 of the 8 Ivy League schools as well, because he's a high academic kid, and ended up settling on Dartmouth and Coach Buddy Tevens. Great staff, wonderful place, great school. Obviously, mom's happy. We're at a top 10, academic school, and just a wonderful experience for him thus far. Kind of being disrupted somewhat, as all of our lives have been, through living through these world-changing events with COVID, but seems to be back on track now, and really, really excited for him to finally touch the field. His freshman year, a couple of years ago, back in 2019, he was just a scout team player, kind of still learning the game, and it was his first semester there in college. But they won the Ivy League championship his freshman year, so he's got a ring. So now he's looking to, get another ring where he's actually one of the starters on the field. So he's a big, strong, fast kid. And, I'm a little biased because I'm his father, but, sometimes you're looking for things in your kid and you don't quite know if they've got it or if they can do it. I can say with confidence that my son can do as much as he really wants to do with this game of football. He's that talented. Like I said, he's strong, fast. He's got excellent hands, and he runs. He's got his dad's speed. So he can run like a deer. So, I just look forward to finally seeing him on the field and enjoy the time with his teammates, and look forward to Dartmouth football having a great year this year. So most of the time I'll be in studio, but they play a lot of games and kind of in the New England area. So I'm able to take some time out and go and see him and visit him. And so just a proud dad.
Nice. So real quick, before we get to the last two things, This is a two-part question. I just want to get your thoughts. Who was the toughest quarterback that you played against in your career, and also who do you like? Which defensive end did you like in this year's draft?
Which defensive end did I like in this year's draft?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the first question is toughest quarterback. There's actually two people that come to mind. Physically, it'd have to be Steve McNair, hands down. You know, God rest his soul. Talked about him earlier, about his toughness and what he brings to the table. You know, nearly impossible to bring down in the pocket. One of the strongest men. I mean, once you beat the person in front of you, you had to bring down Steve McNair, you know, before he was able to stiff arm you and still, you know, muscle the ball out. You know, there's times where I've hit Steve McNair and guys have him wrapped up and, you know, there's nothing to show for it because he's, you know, completed the pass because he's that strong. The other quarterback that comes to mind is Peyton Manning.
Mm-hmm.
Peyton Manning, the reason he was so tough to play against is not only is he's a fierce competitor, but his command of the field and the play clock and the manipulation of where you are and where you're lined up, how you're showing what you're playing on defense. A lot of times as the play clock winds down, the defense will shift into position. They're trying to confuse the quarterback. You know, I know this is probably high level X's and O's stuff, but his manipulation of the cadence, and you can look this up, you know, if you Google, you know, Peyton Manning quarterback cadence and seeing him pre-snap, it's really a thing of beauty.
Yeah.
Because you're down in your stance as a defensive lineman, and he is sparking out all of these random, stupid things that don't make sense. He's andala, apple, bongo, two, down to go. You know, and he's just walking around and he's hut, and he's doing all this, and then he'll walk back and then, you know, 20 seconds will have gone by. And you're still, as a defensive lineman, in your stance. It's mentally, psychologically, over the course of 3.5, 4 hours, exhausting from down to play against Peyton Manning. That's his advantage. He would literally wear you down mentally as to where by the time the ball was snapped, you don't even remember what your assignment was on the play or what defense was called, because you're waiting so much and you're hinging on its every word because we can't move until the ball is snapped. And so, you know, as far as tough quarterbacks playing, that was a game that I had to be not only physically ready for, but psychologically and mentally. I had to be ready to face Peyton Manning. This year, going into this year's draft, wasn't that strong for edge rushers, so to speak, and looking, you know, in the last couple of seasons, there's always been a Chase Young or a Bosa, right? There's been that guy who was just head and shoulders dominant. You know, he's going to be a Pro Bowler. There really wasn't that guy as far as an edge rusher. There were a bunch of good guys. There were a bunch of good players. You know, there were guys who were on the side of, you know, the outside linebacker rush guys like, you know, the Azeez Ojulares. You know, if I look at him from Georgia, you know, he's a guy who's an outside linebacker type who could be, you know, kind of like a TJ Watt, you know, type outside linebacker, guy that can get to the quarterback, but also, you know, cover in the flat.
How about Micah Parsons?
I'm sorry?
How about Dallas getting Micah Parsons? Do you like that?
Now that's actually a great pick. You know, he's a versatile linebacker that can probably do everything. I think he's better suited to probably play inside linebacker, being that you had your middle linebacker retire. I think if you're for Cowboys fans out there, you just lost an inside linebacker to retirement. So I think that's good timing. And Micah Parsons, you know, is the truth. You just don't have linebackers that are 245 pounds that run a 4.4. And that's something, you know, that they just don't exist. And when you turn on the tape, what I like about Micah Parsons is that seeing him ball out matches up with the numbers you see that he can put up in the weight room as well. So the proof is in the pudding of what you see. As far as maybe a down guy that I like this year, there's a kid named Kwity Paye from Michigan. And, you know, kind of an intriguing guy. Not a lot of people could play a true end position in a 3-4 or a 4-3 defense on the next level. And I think he can. That's sort of a tricky versatility of a guy who I think who can do a lot for an NFL team that had a good college career. But I think we're going to see him, have an even better, longer, more productive NFL career.
Yeah, so the last two things here, our team is part of this foundation called the Hugh Jackson Foundation. He's now on the staff with Eddie George. He's the new offensive coordinator at Tennessee State with Eddie George. And I'll send you that page. We're trying to help Coach Hugh prevent human trafficking and making sure the community is safe and the kids stay safe. And I'll send you that page. And we're really grateful to be part of that foundation. And the last thing here, would you like to say anything to the nurses, doctors, and essential workers right now?
Definitely. To all of our essential workers, to all the people on our front lines, all the healthcare professionals all over the world, we hold you in the highest regard. We keep you in our utmost thoughts and prayers, because without all of you working so hard at ground level, we would not have any semblance of real life. We would have no football season. We would have no return to trying to maintain our sanity within the midst of world-changing events and so many lives that have been lost, that are still continuing to be lost. So we thank you for your efforts and your continuing, just tireless efforts in taking care of us and surging forth as a people. So thank you. I can't say thank you enough. I think so many people take for granted how we live. And I think during a pandemic, you realize what you miss most is really our freedom, right? And our connection to one another. And I think those people, those healthcare professionals, are the ones who ensure that we'll be able to return to that. So thank you.
Yeah, well said. And there it is, guys. That wraps up episode 783 with Super Bowl champ Kevin Clark from the St. Louis Rams. And he also played for the Titans, Dolphins, Buccaneers. And it was truly an honor, man. You had a great career, NFL career, over 100 sacks, over 628 tackles, all-time pro sacks leader, Rookie of the Year, MVP, you name it. He did everything in the league. And now he's a broadcaster at CBS Sports. Go check him out. And I'm going to be posting this on all social media formats. And keep up the great work, and you and your family stay safe.
Hey, thank you. And yeah, I'm Kevin Carter. There's a blue check on all my social media, so it's the real me.
It's the real Kevin Carter.
That's it.